Hello. I'm making this video on Maundy, Thursday, 2020, our Holy Week observance under the Safer at Home edict here in Wisconsin. We'll be talking about the text of John 13, where Jesus washes his disciples' feet. And if you're joining me on this Maundy, Thursday or another Maundy, Thursday, it's an appointed text for the day. It's something that happened on this day all those years ago. But of course, the Word of God has its own power, and it's not bound by any day or any season. And so if you're joining me in this conversation on a different day sometime in my future, I'm glad you're here, and I'm grateful for your gift of time and attention. So we begin with John 13, verses 1 through 20. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." And after he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their masters, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. I am not speaking of all of you. I know whom I have chosen, but it is to fulfill the scripture, the one who ate my bread has lifted his heel against me. I tell you this now before it occurs, so that when it does occur, you may believe that I am he. Very truly I tell you, whoever receives one whom I send receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So there is an awful lot there that we could talk about. But again, let's set the table for one another and then just pick something that we might grow together and converse together. As is John's habit, as is his pattern, it's an incredibly dense lesson. We could easily go verse by verse and benefit thereby. But the first three verses are just jam-packed, right? It's the Passover. Do you remember the Passover, right? The Passover is this Jewish celebration commemorating the rescue by God of the people Israel from their bondage and slavery in Egypt. It's about the power of God, the relative power of God to any human king or potentate. It's about God hating slavery and setting his people free. It's about the provision of God. It's about the mastery of God over life and death. It is an enormous story. It is an enormous set of themes and promises that continue to give light to all of us who are Jewish and Christian to this day. So it's Passover. It's Passover in an occupied land, in an occupied time, where people are wanting the liberation that God had given them in previous days, where they are hoping for displays of God's power, where they are hungry for a sign, a demonstration of God's presence, and there are questions in the air. Is Jesus the one? Is he the new Moses? Is he the one to take Israel out of captivity again through the wilderness and into the land of promise? So it's Passover. It's also a time where Jesus knows his hour has come. After all of the talk about not my time, not my hour, not yet, not now, his hour has come. It's a time where his love for them is revealed, and the phrase is, he loved them to the end. Not just the end of his life, not just to the end of this part of the story, but to the end of what it's possible to love, the end of the definition of love, the end of any other definition of love. He loves them to the end. He knows that the Father has given all things into his hands, and he knows that he has come from God and is going to God. It's a moment in which he is on the verge of doing the thing that he has come to do, doing the thing that the Holy Trinity has planned to do since before the creation of all things. It is the pivotal moment, not only in human history, but in the history of all of creation, where things turn, where darkness begins to be pushed back, where the light exerts itself in a new way. There's this crescendo in these 3 verses of all of these mighty themes coming together. It's the hour, it's the Passover. He knows where he's from, he knows where he's going. He's loved them as much as anyone can love anyone. He's loved them to the end, and you expect some magnificent, some enormous thing to happen next, right? The music has built and swelled and built and swelled, and now surely the brass is going to come crashing in with some theme of victory and power. Well, you'd think. And you'd be wrong. Given that kind of setup, given that build-up, Jesus takes off his outer robe, ties a towel around himself, pours water into a basin, and begins to wash his disciples' feet. He has this wonderful conversation with Peter, where Peter says, absolutely not. No, you're the teacher, you're the master. My feet, absolutely not. Jesus says, unless I do, you have no part of me. And Peter then is all in. Why stop at my feet? Here are my hands. Here's my head. There's so much there that we can talk about. Let's bracket that for another time. Jesus takes his place again at table. He says, you call me teacher and Lord, and that's right. That's what I am. And if I, your Lord and teacher, have done this for you, you ought do it for one another. And that's the part that I'd like us to talk about together today, right? Not only ought we do it, we are instructed to do it. A servant isn't greater than the master. The messenger isn't greater than the one who sends the message. If the master does these things, then you and I ought to do them as well. So why don't we? Well, you're probably aware that a number of denominations do have foot washing ceremonies on Maundy Thursdays as part of their public observance, as part of their public gathering for worship. Just a note to those of you in the Tomorrow River Parish, Lutherans do too, and not just a few of them. And perhaps whenever the time comes for you to have a new pastor, a different pastor, you want to ask about this in the call interview. Are you going to do one of those weird foot washing deals on Maundy Thursday? You probably want to know in advance. For those of you who are not part of the parish, we don't do that here. we do not do a public foot washing ceremony to commemorate this day in the life of Christ and in Christian history. And we don't for several reasons. The first and the most important is that for me, at least, as one of the pastors in this place, I think it gets away very quickly from what it's supposed to be. So I would dress up either in my collar or in my alb. That's the long white robe. I'd wear the seasonally appropriate stole, purple, for the season of Lent. And then I would gather some collection of persons up at the front of the church, and I would wash their feet. So if you just look at it, we're reenacting something. And the people sitting there would be playing the part of the disciples, right? And I'd be playing the part of Jesus. As if my collar or my office or my alb or my stole don't give me enough standing, don't set me apart sufficiently. We're going to reenact something in which each and every year I play Jesus in the midst of the people. I don't think that's what's supposed to happen. I don't think people are supposed to watch me and think, that's how Jesus did it. I don't think people are supposed to look at me and think about Jesus at the same time in this way. I hope you understand. Of course, all of us are supposed to reflect the love and the light and the grace and the peace of Jesus. But to be play acting as if I were he seems wrong to me. It's also true that at this time I live, work, and serve among Norwegian Lutheran persons who practice social distancing as an ordinary manner of life. And I think they would hate it to be drawn up onto the dais and to have their feet washed in front of their friends and neighbors. Now, parish members, you feel free to correct me if I've got this wrong, but once we get past the choice of whom I would choose, do I choose people that I consider friends? Do I choose people that have contested with me for leadership in this place, or for power in this place? Who do I choose? And then to make them sit there waiting their turn to have this deeply unusual and forced intimacy in the presence of friends, family, and neighbors, I just think I think no one would come. Now, I'm not just guessing at how uncomfortable this is. I've been part of one of these. When I was in seminary, I was a kid. I was 22, right? 22, 23, something like that. And I went to a religious conference. I had no idea this was coming. And at some moment, we got pulled out of the conference. A couple of seminarians and a couple of pastors, we got pulled out and we got taken to this room, and they washed our feet as a mark of respect, as a mark of hope, as a discipline for themselves, but also as a way of saying that those who were preparing or were engaged in a life of service for the church need be served by the people of God. And from their perspective, I imagine, I hope, it was a holy moment where they gave a gift that is rare and special and priceless. How do you quantify a gift like that? I almost squirmed myself to death. I almost couldn't make it. It was so desperately uncomfortable for me. These were my elders, and I come out of a tradition in which regard for elders is paramount. Beyond that, I hadn't done anything yet. I was in seminary. I didn't deserve any sort of praise or congratulation. And let's just be candid for a moment. I still don't deserve any special praise or congratulation. I'm doing the thing that I think I'm compelled to do, that I'm required to do. And it's no great thing to do your duty as you understand it. It's rare in certain circles, vanishingly rare in some, but doing the basic thing that you're commanded to do, that's between God and I hope, on the average, I've done it faithfully. But I certainly don't need any accolades for doing my duty. It just felt awful. Plus, there was the forced intimacy of it, that I hadn't known it was coming. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't really understand why. I don't ever want to do that to anyone else. So we don't do it here. The last thing, and maybe the critical thing, because sometimes we need to move out of our comfort zone. Sometimes we need to do things that we don't understand, that will grow into understanding. But for me, the critical decision about why we don't do foot washing in the Tomorrow River is because when Jesus did it, it was private. There was no one watching the show. There was no show. It was an intimate moment between travelers, between friends, between a master and teacher and his students, his disciples. There was no audience. It was private. So we don't do it. But yet, Jesus says we ought do it, that he's set a pattern for us. He's given us this as an example, and that a servant is not greater than the master. A messenger is not greater than the one who sends the message. So, how do we think our way through this? And what is it that you and I can do today to honor Jesus, to live in obedience, and to grow under this story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet? I think that this is a command that we ought privately, intentionally, deliberately, frequently care for one another. That part of being a follower of Jesus is that we look for opportunities to serve those around us. Those who are part of the family of God, who know that they belong to Christ, and those who do not yet know that they are also caught up in what God is doing in the creation, that they also have the opportunity to become children of God. That we're supposed to pour ourselves out. That we're supposed to put our dignity aside, take off our outer robe, as it were, and tie on a towel. That we do the things around us that must be done without regard for our standing or our station or our education or our privileges or our race or our gender or our money. We just do the work of caring for the people around us. I think that this is about putting aside our pride. And I think it's about intentionally washing the parts of one another that become dirty. That we as a group and as citizens of the kingdom of God are looking out for one another. And when one of our brothers or sisters is slipping away, is falling into sin, is letting the flames of love and passion grow cold, that we would step in and help redeem that one with a gentle word, with a direct word, if necessary, with real assistance, with an invitation to walk with them through this difficulty, or through this temptation, or through this falling. That we would be the hands of Christ, helping them to regain their cleanliness, helping them to regain their purity. That we would be deeply and richly and fully concerned about one another, and not in any sort of judgmental way, not in any way that puts us above them, but as Jesus did, stooping low, taking off all of the trappings of his office, and setting aside the prerogatives of his standing and his position, and washing his disciples' feet. That this would be, for you and for me this day, an example, a pattern of how it is that we are to live with one another and in the world. On this day, I want you to know that Christ has made you clean. When you were baptized into Christ, you were baptized into his life and into his death, and you were covered with his righteousness. He has made you clean. And he continues to call your name, and to stoop low, and to offer to wash your feet, to wash the parts of you that you've allowed to become dirty, to purify the parts of you that you've allowed to become unclean, to redeem and restore all the parts of you, the hidden parts of you, the dirty parts of you, the broken parts of you. That the great Lord of light kneels before you and offers you forgiveness, restoration, and peace. Can you see it? Can you feel it? Do you comprehend the gift of a king kneeling before you to make you whole, to make you strong, to make you pure? What a wondrous thing. May you know that Christ continues to wash you and to care for you, to lead you and to encourage you, to chasten you and to discipline you, that you might more and more become a child of light. And may you live, may I live, lives of obedient service, lives of grace and peace. May it be said of you, and may it be said of me, at the hour of our deaths, that we poured ourselves out for the family of God. Thank you for this moment. I look forward to having conversations about this or anything else that's come up this day. I wish you God's peace on this Maundy Thursday. I wish you God's peace whenever it is that you watch this video. Thank you for the gift of time.